everybody. So we're here again having another conversation for Men's Health Week, and it is a true pleasure to be joined today by Elliott Ray. So Elliott's a speaker, an author, a presenter, a multi-talented man, a man on a mission to ensure that organisations actively support dads amongst the many things that he's involved in. So most recently, Elliott, you started an initiative or a movement, perhaps we'll call it, called Parenting Out Loud. Can you tell us what's it all about and how does it connect to men's health?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Lynn. Parenting Out Loud is transformational. It's about empowering working dads to be loud and proud and unapologetic and transparent about their caring responsibilities in the workplace. Now, this is a step change from what many of us have grown up seeing. I'll never forget one of my first jobs. I worked in the civil service for a long time. And there was a guy that I used to sit next to, and I thought I know him pretty well. You know, we went on away days together, we'd be at the tea point, we'd have lunch together. And it took about 10 months for him to let slip. He had 2 toddler daughters, twins. So he was hiding not one child, but 2. I think back in 2005, that probably was the norm. It was probably more likely that dads would come to work and actually not talk very much about their home life, not talk about their childcare responsibilities, definitely not be so open to everyone about why they need to leave early and requesting paternity leave and stuff like that. So Parenting Out Loud for dads is a massive transformational change. What is it? It is about dads requesting flexible working and saying, I need to work flexibly because I need to pick up my daughter or my son on a Friday and Thursday afternoon. I need to leave early. I need to work from home sometimes to be around for the school pickups. It's dad saying, I want to take all of the paternity leave that is available in my organization and taking that loudly and proudly and coming back into work and telling everyone what they did and the ups and downs and blogging about it and telling their line manager and advocating for enhanced parental leave. It's dads being open and honest when their child is sick and they need to be at home to look after their sick baby. Babies get about 10 colds per year in their first year of life. You know, someone has to stay at home with the baby. So being honest with your line manager and saying, I need to work from home today. It's about proudly keeping your calendar open and putting in there 4 p.m. or 3 p.m. the school pickup, letting everyone know where you are going when you need to leave the office a little bit early. Parenting Out Loud is being loud and proud about your caring responsibilities at work. But it's not easy. I think it sounds nice and it sounds great, but it's not always easy. It's not easy to do. I've spoken to so many dads who have made up fake appointments in their calendar because they don't want to be open about the fact that they need to be rushing off home early. Dads that have said that they are sick or that their car is broken or, you know, another travel issue, rather than saying, actually, my child is unwell and I need to stay home with them. We are battling against years of kind of cultural conditioning and cultural norms. And I want to tell you a story that I think encapsulates that pretty well. So I was doing a series of workshops with an organization last year. We did one in May and one in December. And the one in May was about parenting out loud and empowering dads and all that sort of stuff. And the one in December was about male allyship. Now, at the end of the December session, a man came up to me and said, Elliott, I was so inspired by the Parenting Out Loud message and conversation we had. I've started to use my out of office on a Friday to talk about the fact that I'm with my kids. He works compressed hours. On a Friday, he doesn't work. He goes to the cinema, he goes swimming. So he would use his out of office to talk about what he was doing with his children. Great. He said he had 3 responses to this. Wonderful. The first was from another dad who was like, this is incredible. I didn't know you could work flexibly here. I'm going to put in my own flexible working request. You know, role modeling, incredible. The second was from a lady who was just so interested in what he was doing on a Friday. She would send him a test email, just to see what you're doing, just to get the response, ideas for the weekend. Great. The third was from his line manager, a senior leader, who said, this is a bit too much. Can you tone it down? Now, I think in that roller coaster of a story, we really see what we can achieve, but also what we're up against. You know, the role modeling is important. Dads Parenting Out Loud encourages other dads to do the same. We'll get affirmations and encouragement, but at the same time, we have some line managers and leadership who are, you know, not necessarily on board with progression in this space. But it is so important. You know, Dads Parenting Out Loud is a key part of equal parenting, and equal parenting is a key part of fixing the motherhood penalty and reducing the gender pay gap. Dads who have involved relationships with their children are happier and healthier. And it's also really good for business, because we know that especially young dads are making decisions on where they're going to work based on flexibility, parental leave, friendly policies, not just how much am I getting paid. So Parenting Out Loud is, you know, being loud and proud. And we started with a campaign across TfL in April. We're doing loads of work with dads, with organizations to make this a reality.
That's fantastic. Love what you're doing. And I can see how, you know, creating momentum, creating a movement that normalizes this and just makes it, you know, the way to do business is really important. And so a key theme from Men's Health Week is to open men up to sharing their stories with others. And this is something that I know you're brilliant at doing, and you really believe in the power of that. And I was really sorry to hear, you know, the PTSD that you went through following the traumatic birth of your daughter. Now, as part of that, formal therapy helps you get through it. But I would also imagine that, you know, friendships and relationships outside of that formal treatment were also really powerful. I know you've set up Music, Football and Fatherhood, and you've curated a moving set of stories as well called Dad, which we can just see in the screen behind you, which is available to buy. But, you know, I was curious to know how has that helped you? So how has sharing your story, and specifically, you know, maybe sharing that with men, how has that helped? And how can we normalize that, you know, as part of just being a good mate, a good husband, a brother, a good dad, so that men automatically feel it's good to share?
So for me, Lynn, I think storytelling is so important. You know, when we tell our stories, we let other people know that we have a shared experience. And so much of our experiences are not new. They may feel like we're the first person to have ever experienced this thing, but actually there's hundreds of thousands of people that have experienced very similar to our lives. But often with men, we don't share our stories, so we're very unaware. When I was finally ready to talk about my PTSD experience, my daughter's birth, I sat down with a journalist called Kirsty Brewer from the BBC. And it was the first time kind of out of therapy or out of talking with my wife, I actually shared my story. And I sat down with her for 6 hours, 2 separate Zoom calls, and shared everything. And the day before that article came out, I was really nervous about how it was going to be perceived, because it maybe didn't match with what people saw me and my personality. I'm quite an extroverted, outgoing person. Maybe that didn't match with who they thought I was. Would some people be upset that I didn't tell them at the time? You know, all these things were going through my mind. Are they going to think I'm weak, etc.? But I'm so glad I did share that story, because it stayed on the BBC homepage for a whole month and was viewed 3 million times on the first day. And what was interesting after that got published, for the weeks ahead, I received so many emails from men across the UK and across the world, actually. And for so many of those men, they said, Elliott, you could have literally told my story. The words you wrote described my life and my experience and my child's birth. Like, thank you for sharing my story, because you basically reflected my experience back on paper to me. That was great. The sad part was, for so many of those men, they said this is the first time that they've ever told anyone. And it made me think, why is it the first time they've ever told anyone about their traumatic birth experience? And when they are sharing that story for the first time, why is it with a stranger from the internet? Why is it not with their partner, their best friend, their parents, their work colleagues? And how do we go about creating spaces and workplaces and community groups and a National Health Service that can really empower and enable dads to share their stories? So Music, Football, Fatherhood is all about open conversations about fatherhood. We do a couple of things. We partner with the Premier League and different football clubs to have really open conversations in football stadiums, and they're incredible. we also do online group therapy called The Lodge on a monthly basis. I'll never forget one of our sessions we did with Queen's Park Rangers Football Club, my team, by the way, the best team in London. That's not a debate. I'm sure the comments will say it otherwise, but we'll have that. So we did a session at QPR and we're on the way to the stadium. And we got into the stadium. And normally at these events, there's some people that we might know because they've come to our events before and, you know, we've engaged with them. Others that will just see the advertising and they'll come along. So we got into the room, started the session. And at the back, there was this guy. I remember this guy. He was a big guy, big beard, very manly man. Mm-hmm. And he was at the back and he just looked so miserable. And I was thinking, like, you know, no one's forced you to be here, but, you know, he looked very miserable. He looked like he wasn't engaged. He didn't really want to be there. So anyway, I get talking to him and he's basically saying, look, I'm here. I'm a QPR fan. I'm here for the stadium tour. The stadium tour is part of the event. I'm here for the stadium tour, but, you know, I'm not really. Okay, fine. So we go through the session, and slowly he starts getting engaged and he starts joining the group discussions and the peer discussions. He's involved in it. By the end, this guy is literally leading the session. He's up at the front, directing the conversation and basically facilitating the men. And the reason why we use football as a way to get men together to share their stories is that we know it's a safe, interesting, relatable place to be in. And there are so many men like that example who are not invited into a welcoming space to be able to share their story. But I know from experience that when the environment is right, men talk. Men talk a lot when the environment is right. And a lot of those stories that we've been holding for years come out. And they come out with tears and emotion and vulnerability. It's incredible. Something really special happens when you get men together to share their stories. And I think it is transformational. I think it is what a lot of people need. Don't get me wrong. You know, if you're going through serious mental health issues, then you need to seek professional help through a therapist, through mine, through the NHS doctors, etc.
Sure.
In addition, there is so much space and value in peer support. And peer support ultimately is storytelling. It is about being able to be vulnerable and tell your truth. So I think it's about, you know, workplaces being able to do some of that at work as well. We spend so much of our lives with our work colleagues in work. Being able to come to work and talk about parenting, talk about your mental health, talk about your physical health, talk about the ups and downs of life that we all go through, financial challenges. Being able to come to work and share those stories, I think, is fundamental to our well-being. For men, it's very important. We are lacking connection. 1 in 5 men have no close friends. 75% of suicides are men. We find it very difficult to allow ourselves to express a whole range of emotions. And when we do, we find it very hard to connect with other people and do that in a safe space. So I think we can all play our part in encouraging men to share stories, sharing our own story, investing in spaces where that can happen, recommending organizations like Music Football Fatherhood and the various others, role modeling the behavior ourselves, rethinking ideas about masculinity and what it means to be a strong man. All these things that we can play a part in, I think, are so important to improving men's health at work, in our families, and in our communities as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, you touched on the role employers can play in terms of things like, you know, equal parental leave, flexible working, those kind of policies that businesses can put in place. But there's also things like employee resource groups, where, you know, there are an increasing number of them for men, but they're very small in number. I think it would be fantastic to see more of those being created, or, as you say, you know, safe spaces for men to speak. And, you know, I know from my own lived experiences, there's nothing quite like the connection you get when someone has a shared experience, because they know how you feel and in a way that nobody else can. And that's really healing, I think. So the other way that I feel really strongly that businesses can help is through developing advertising. So we've seen at Kantar, through the work that we do, that when you portray people positively and when you portray men and boys positively, that's not only the right thing to do for society, but it also makes your advertising more effective. So like it's a no-brainer, isn't it? But I wondered, what your point of view is about the way men and boys tend to be portrayed in advertising, and what you think brands need to do differently or do better to engage more effectively with them and drive positive change as a result.
So this is really interesting because, as you mentioned, it's the right thing to do for business. You sell more products, you're going to connect with more communities, and advertising has so much power in regards to normalizing ideas and people, making people feel seen, changing what we see as normal or good or bad.
Yeah.
And so, I strongly believe in the power of advertising. And sometimes what I'll do on my LinkedIn actually is when I'm out and about and I see a really good advert, I'll take a picture and I'll post that as a good example. I'll never forget there was one time I was on the underground and there was a baby pram brand. I can't remember exactly which one, but it showed a black dad with his baby in the pram.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that and I was like, wow, it spoke to me because I don't see that often in regards to advertising. It was a massive billboard at Euston Station. I took a picture of it and I posted it on LinkedIn and said, this is an amazing advert. It's so simple, but they've obviously intentionally made the decision to include a black man in this advert. And what does that do for everyone seeing this in regards to if you're black feeling included, but if you're not seeing black fathers as present in their children's lives? So that was amazing. I actually got an amazing response on LinkedIn, and the advertising agency contacted me to say thank you for posting and highlighting.
Yes.
So I think what we've seen across the media is an improvement, definitely. I think some of the outdated ideas of men have to be strong and have to be muscly and buff, and dads are bumbling like Peppa Pig's dad. I still have a gripe with that one. But we're seeing less of that, I think, when I'm out and about, and I don't have the data, but what I see is more positive representation. I do see more men involved in maybe campaigns they wouldn't normally be involved in, maybe in traditionally women's products or products that they wouldn't necessarily sell in a masculine way. So I am seeing improvements. But I would say, though, that I don't think the advertising industry has harnessed their ability and responsibility to be a driver. And by that, I mean, how can the advertising industry really push boundaries and barriers? How can they help to shape the conversation rather than maybe move along with where we are in society? And I think that's an interesting point, because sometimes we can go along with where we are. Sometimes we can push the boundaries and maybe be a bit ahead. And I think I would challenge the advertising industry to think about how can you shape what the conversation is going to be in the future. So I often talk about an idea called the man box, which was popularized by Tony Porter in America. And he spoke about some of these strict ideas about what it means to be a man and what it means to be a successful man traditionally. And they include, suffering emotional and physical pain in silence, being the breadwinner, only showing emotions of bravery and anger, winning at all costs, having all the answers, being an island, not being part of the community. But positive masculinity for me looks like actually help seeking and therapy as a normal part of maintaining a healthy mind and body. It looks like investing in our friendships, male and female friendships, and seeing friendship as a critical part of what we do in our life to maintain longevity and well-being. It looks like sharing caring responsibilities. It looks like being open to embracing all of the emotions that come with life and finding avenues to channel that with connection. And so how can the advertising industry really look at positive masculinity and display that through their advertising? How can they get men who, yes, we can be strong and powerful, we can be breadwinners, that's all good. We can also be caregivers, we can also be led, we can also be provided for, we can also be vulnerable, we can also cry, we can also be part of communities. And I think it's about showing that in a variety of different formats. One really good, I guess, campaign, I would say, is from Norwich City Football Club that showed two men next to each other. It's had millions of views. And I'm sure you've seen it, but if you haven't, very quickly, we assume that the person who is maybe going through a challenge in life is the one that is looking a little bit down, but actually it's the other guy who seems more consistent, who is actually what we'd be saying is displaying like normal behavior. Very, very powerful video. And I use that in some of my trainings. I know that has been probably in recent years the most powerful advert around men's mental health and suicide. How can we take that into advertising? How can we take that kind of concept and messaging and visuals and bravery into what we do to advertise our products? So I would definitely say we have seen improvements. I would definitely say I cringe less at media and movies and advertising. But I wouldn't say I've seen anything that I think helping to shape and really revolutionize people's thinking about what they're doing. You know, we launched our Parenting Out Loud campaign with a TfL billboard campaign across the London Underground in Euston, Waterloo, and Victoria. And it was a bright yellow poster that said Parenting Out Loud, empowering working dads when dads are loud and proud about their caring responsibilities. The first day that it was up, I walked around, as you do, you know, look at your own posters. I walked around London Underground. And the amount of people that I saw stop and look at the posters, because they're bright yellow, you can't really miss them.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of people that stopped and looked, and I thought, do I go up to you and say they're my posters? But that'd be really weird, so I didn't. But the amount of people that stopped and looked at the posters and just took them in and scanned the QR code, and I was like, imagine if there's a big corporation with hundreds of thousands of pounds that actually could invest in a massive nationwide campaign to reshape masculinity. Amazing things could happen. So advertising has power. I think it has a responsibility. And I would love to see more work done to reshape what it means to be a man. How? Well, I think talking to organizations that support men and boys, and talking to men and boys themselves, you know, talking about what words, what colors, what visuals, what activities are going to cut through. What products are men and boys going to be interested in 5 years' time, and how can we get ahead of that? I think it's about doing the market research. It's about being very brave, but ultimately knowing that I think that comes with profitability. It comes with increased awareness, and morally, it comes with shaping positive influences across society in regards to men, masculinity, and boys as well.
Wonderful. I wholeheartedly agree. There's a lot businesses can do to really bring about transformation. So I think, you know, mere inclusion, as you talked about in your first story, so seeing yourself represented in a way that feels authentic is a great first step. Telling stories that can only be told from that person's perspective, but you have to really understand them as another. And then the third step, the most progressive, is implementing programs that proactively make a difference. So I think every business, regardless of their size or scale, can have an impact. But there's definitely a great opportunity to bring about positive change and making that meaningful connection, as you talked about, by really understanding the audience you want to connect with. So it resonates with them and not you as the person creating it. It is definitely the key to success. So thanks so much for joining today, Elliott. You're doing brilliant work, achieving wonderful things. So thanks for the difference you're making to men, boys, but to society at large. It's hugely appreciated.
Thank you, Lynn. It's been a pleasure. It's been great to take part. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.